I heard a phrase one time. Am I on? No? Should I be on? No? Okay. Use this? Okay. So nothing from here? No. All right. Hey, great. Got that settled. A new year. Welcome to a new year. Glad to be here. Or at least if I say so myself, I am. I heard a wise man say one time a phrase, and I'm not sure, I'm still evaluating it. Newer is always better. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I do want to start a series on new things. Things maybe that are new to you. Things maybe that when Jesus taught them were new. Things that have the possibility to continue to be new. That's maybe something to think about. But the series I want to go through is about new things, and what better time to start that than here in the new year. And the first thing that I want to talk about is, well, it's 3 questions. What is church? Who is this Jesus guy anyway? And what's our part in all of it? So I thought I'd start small, right? I mean, these are just the little questions that we trivial ourselves with in life and move on. No, come on. These are big questions. What is the church? Who is Jesus? And what's our part in it all? If you've ever wondered those things, I can't address them fully. There's no way to do that, at least in the confines of this service or even one series. But there is a passage that speaks to all 3 of those. There's this little passage, and it's found in Matthew, and it speaks to the idea of who Jesus is, what the church is, and what our part is in it. And it's a beautiful little passage from Matthew 16. If you want to follow along, it begins in verse 13. Matthew 16:13. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do the people say the Son of Man is?" Jesus was referring to himself here. Who do the people say that I am? In other words, what have you heard? What's the word out there? What are people saying? When they talk about me, who do they say? Who do the people say that I am? And so appropriately enough, they repeated back what they've heard. Maybe what they thought, but certainly what others were saying. They replied, "Some say John the Baptist. Others say Elijah, the great prophet, maybe come back. And still others say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets." That was their answer about what they've heard about who Jesus is. And then Jesus said, "What about you? Who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter, of course, the first to do a lot of things, good or bad, rushes in, and he makes a new declaration. This is the first time anybody had identified Jesus as the Son of God. So his answer is, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. When Jesus says, "Who do you say I am?" All right, that's what the others are saying, but what about you? Who do you say I am? Peter answers, "You are indeed the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And again, that was the first time that was acknowledged. That was the first time they came out and said it. Whatever the others may have thought, maybe when Jesus wasn't with them, they had kind of murmured about, whatever the disciples were trying to make of it all, Peter just blurts it out. "You're the Messiah, you're the Son of God." To which Jesus responds, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will have been bound in heaven, and whatever you loosen on earth will have been loosened in heaven." Now, if you were listening to that and I haven't already lost you or you're not asleep, that is an incredible passage. Jesus wants to know, what are people saying? What are they saying about me? What do they talk about me? What's the word on the street? Who do they think I am? But when he asks his disciples, "And so what do you say?" they know, ooh, he's looking for our answer. He's not looking for what we've heard. He's not looking for what others are saying. He wants to know what we think. And by this point, I imagine they were already keen enough that they figured out Jesus knows what they're thinking, and they're not going to get away with a lie here. And so when he asks that question, And when Peter says, "You're the Messiah, Son of the living God," that's the right answer. Peter, in this case, gets it right. Yay, Peter. But then Jesus turns and just launches a powerful, powerful statement. He says, "You're right, and I tell you, I will build my church on this. I," Jesus said, "will build my church on this. And I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven." Wow. That's a lot of responsibility, isn't it? See, I had a panic moment this morning when I was unlocking the church, and I used the little hex key to open the push bars, but like the key to the church itself was not with it. And I thought, oh, this is a problem. I would like to know where the key to the church is, have it in my possession. That's small. Jesus says, "I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven." And he says this to his disciples. He says this to a regular, plain group of people just like you and I. And I think Jesus intended that statement to apply to the regular, plain people like you and I. You will be the church that I build. And it will be built upon the fact that I am indeed the Messiah, Son of the living God. And I will give to you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. See, in ancient times when they selected a site for a building, the first and the most important step that they had was to place a cornerstone. Everything else would be based upon that stone, would want to be level with it and even with it. And that stone would mark the key piece of the foundation, would mark the beginning of the building, and everything else would be measured up against that. And so what Jesus says to Peter is kind of a play on words. When he says, "You are the rock," he's making a joke because Peter's name in Greek was Petros, which means rock. So he's making a play on words. And so he says, "On this rock I will build my church." Only Jesus didn't say church. That's just the translation we have. What Jesus says would be more appropriately translated, "On this rock I will build my gathering," or my movement. Jesus didn't have a physical building in mind. He wasn't pointing to Peter and thinking this will literally be the cornerstone, or the fact that I am the Son of God, we're going to build something physically on top of this. He was putting together a movement. He was putting together something that was based on an ideology. He was putting together a new type of people that would share that in common. And to those people, he would give the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And so the ideology, the thing that brings that group together, the thing that Jesus envisioned as the cornerstone of this movement of these people, was that he indeed is the Son of God, the promised one. And so the church, as Jesus mentions it here, is a movement or a collection of common, regular people that are absolutely convinced he is the Son of God. Does that sound familiar to our church today? That's why I asked the children, when you think of church, what do you think of? I was hoping for maybe a little more response than I got. I know if you had asked me when I was little, I'd have said, yeah, church is the stained glass windows. Church is, at least the church I grew up in, I would have said was the green pews. Nasty. But anyway, that to me was what I always pictured, like green pews. I would have said the church is this or the church is that. The church somehow, I would have identified when I was young as a physical place, a physical building, a physical thing. And Jesus was making a new definition. Just so you don't miss it, here's what was new about that. Here's what was radical. One, the belief that the Messiah, the promised one, the Savior, remember we just celebrated that at Christmas, right? That Jesus was that. Before this, they believed in God. There was one God, and there still is one God. But they believed there was God, and he had absolute authority, and that was it. Here's what's new. Jesus says, I am an expression of God. I am the Son of God. I have the authority of God. That was new. And these people believed it. And he said, I'll build my movement on this. Here's the second thing that was new, was the temple was where God's presence dwelled in the Old Testament. In the times before Jesus, the temple was where God's presence was contained. The temple was where you went to worship. The temple was where you could go and atone for sins. The temple was where you could make sacrifices. The temple is where you made offerings. If you wanted to get to God, you went to the temple. If you wanted to talk to God, you went to the temple. If you wanted to find God, the temple. Know about God, the temple. Love God, the temple. And what does Jesus say? Jesus says, I'm going to build my church, or again, my movement, my group of people, my gathering, and it's going to go through you. It's going out. It's not about the temple or the meeting place, the gathering place. It's about the people that gather. It's about the movement that I'm starting based on that truth that I am the Son of God. And here's the really wild third thing that's new in that. The church, so it's not a building, the church is us. The church is you. You are the fulfillment of what Jesus had in mind when he shared with his disciples. Andy Stanley's quick to point out how significant that is. Jesus predicted us. Jesus has this conversation with his followers, and he talks about what will be, and he's saying, this is who I am, and this is who you are, and someday this movement's going to happen, built on the knowledge of who I am, and it's going to go out through us. You, and you, and you, and you, and you, today, here, now, back then, in the future. It happens through the people of God who are convinced that Jesus was the Son of God, and it is not contained to any one place. In fact, the church is a moving, living thing. It goes out. That means every time that we lift each other up in prayer, every time that we sing God's praises together, every time we make an offering, every time we give generously to something outside of ourselves, whenever we witness or serve or show love, because God did that for us first, every time we live in those type of ways, we are fulfilling Jesus' description to his disciples of what the church is. Did you ever think about that? That we don't just do these things because we do these things, and I wouldn't know what else to do with a Sunday if I didn't do these things. But we're carrying out what Jesus said the church would be. When he talked to Peter 2,000 years ago, he was talking about everybody that would live in this way, and he was talking about me, and he was talking about you. So what does that mean for us? If that's new, and again, maybe you've thought about it in that way before, but maybe not, what does that mean for us? Well, according to John's gospel, and this was the biblical focus I put on the front of your bulletin, Jesus parted with his disciples. So after that conversation and time had passed, he parts with his disciples with these words: as the Father has sent me, so I am sending you. In the same way that God sent me to show who God really is and to share love with others and to be in service to others, I am sending you. In the same way that God didn't contain himself in the dimension that is heaven, but stepped into your world, so I am sending you not to be contained in a building, but to be out in the world. In the same way, Jesus said, the Father has sent me. I am sending you. I am sending you. I am sending you out. Because the church is not contained. It is not a physical location. It is a moving thing. And so what do we do with that? If we are the church, and if Jesus predicted us, and if he is leading us as a cornerstone, and we're to go out, what do we do with that? In 2018, my hope is, my prayer is, my desire is for this congregation, and not just for the missions team, and not just for the leadership, and not just for myself. My hope for this church, that is all of us, is that we will stop simply going to church, and that we will be the church. My hope is that we will be the movement Jesus talked about. My great friend in ministry, Matt Pickett, he always used to say, I get so tired of people talking about church because they don't talk about how we do church. He said, church is something we do. It's something we are. How do we be the church? And he used to get so upset every time somebody'd talk about, well, I went to church. He'd say, you don't go to church. You do church. You be the church. My hope for 2018 is we won't simply go to church, that we will be the church. And here's how I saw some of you do this already. In case you're saying, well, Pastor Devin, you're kind of hurting my feelings a little bit. Here's what I've done. No, I've already seen this. I've seen glimmers of this. I've seen you do this. In 2017, in the year past, here's what I witnessed. You gave generously, selflessly, towards the campaign that we had. We normally have somewhere in the ballpark of $160,000 for a budget. We met our budget, and you gave another $100,000 towards our campaign. You did that. Many of you took it upon yourselves to help out a local family. When they got some bad news and they were in a tight spot, several of you in different ways said, I can make a difference. I can help them. And by the way, that's not a family that attends our church. You didn't just look out for yourselves. You saw someone else in need and you said, I can help that. It's the way that you help neighbors through the act of winterization and yard cleanup. We did a couple outings like that and made a tremendous difference for some people. It wasn't your yard. It wasn't really time that you wanted to spend in that way, but you did to help others out. You were being the church. It was when you gave a heap load of books and yarn, and I shipped that, honestly, for quite a lot more than I thought it would cost to ship those things, to our missionaries in Malawi, so that they could give gifts to those that they serve. By the way, this last week, I received a thank you from our missionaries in Malawi. They said, we received the books, we received the yarn, we love it, we've passed it out, we're sharing it with people, and it got there. Thank you. It's the way you supported so many people through prayer. We have an active prayer chain. We publish the prayer requests in our bulletin. When you pray for those people, you're being the church. When some of you come into the school and you mentor students in our local elementary school, when you take your lunchtime, when you take that moment and say, maybe I can offer something to this student, you're being the church. In 2017, I saw all of those things and more. But that is what Jesus pictured. It is good and it is right and it is proper at all times to worship God. Meeting together for worship is a wonderful thing, and I'm happy to do that. I love coming here and worshiping with you. But that is not the only thing we should be doing as a church. That is not how we do church in its entirety. A moment of worship, awesome. But there's more to church than that. Bill Hybels, founder of Willow Creek, founder of the Global Leadership Summit, that's planning churches and church leaders literally across the globe. I think it's almost 100 countries throughout the world. He's planning churches and church leaders, and he has an enormous church in Illinois. Bill Hybels says this, the local church is the hope of the world. Bill Hybels is gripped by a conviction that what Jesus said he meant, that wherever people gather and they believe he's the Son of God and they go out and do, the world changes. Bill Hybels is gripped by that, believes it to the core, practices it, and says the local church is the hope of the world. Again, put it in these terms. You and I, following Jesus Christ, going out and engaging the world, serving and loving others, that is the hope the world needs. We are the hope of the world as we follow Jesus. So the question is, in 2018, how will we be the hope of the world? How will we do church? How will we be the movement Jesus predicted? In this whole year that's open to us and laid ahead of us, how are we going to be the church? I don't know. Let's wrap it up. All right, closing prayer. No, I don't know. That's the beautiful thing. To me, that's the exciting thing. That's the wonderful thing. I am convinced, absolutely positive, that God is on the move, continues to be on the move, continues to work. Where will God lead us? What will our part be in what God is doing? I have no idea, and I love it. Because rest assured, there is something and somewhere and sometime and some moment for each of you to plug in and make a difference for Jesus Christ in this world. But I know that when we work together and we follow God, we can be life-changing together. We can be the church. Maybe it'll be as we partner with the Rotary Club that meets here now. We've been sharing space with them, and I know they appreciate it. Maybe we can do something cool with them for Easter, because we don't really have a community outreach that we do for Easter. Maybe we could make that happen. The Lions Club, they do a wonderful Easter egg hunt. Maybe the three, the church and the Rotary Club and the Lions Club, could all work together, and we could do something really awesome in the community for the sake of Jesus at Easter time. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe it could be that new place on the corner that just opened up. What if a group of us got together and had a regular Bible study there at regular times, that we were encountering regular people, and somebody who is spiritually curious just had to stop and ask a question? How come we meet there? How come we're talking about the Bible? Who do we believe Jesus is? I don't know. Maybe that's it. Maybe it'll be as we open our food pantry this year. Maybe as we begin to distribute goods to people that are in a tight spot. Maybe we will genuinely touch someone's life. And they'll ask why we're doing this. Or they'll tell us their story of how that helps them get through. Or they'll come back and say, I was so blessed. You had no idea. Here's how close I was. Thank you for what you've done. And how can I help too? And they'll be invited into whatever it is that God's doing. Maybe it's a use that we haven't discovered yet for our ministry building. I mean, maybe it's just that wide open. But in 2018, if we talk about church as being this building and what happens in here, that's great. If we talk about church as something that's based on the belief that we serve the living God, and we take it so far outside this building that it's hard to trace where it came from, and we minister to others with the love of Christ, God is going to open up in a powerful way and transform lives and make more disciples. When we come together as ordinary and plain people, when we come together without any special gifts or talents, each one of us has things we can do that are unique, and we come together for the purpose of following Christ. We are the hope of the world. And Jesus will use us to be the church that he predicted. Would you pray with me? Holy God, I give you thanks for the community here in Brookston. God, I give you thanks for the people of this church. And God, I give you thanks because you promised to guide us and to lead us in transforming the world. God, it's an amazing thing that you tell us we can have the keys, and whatever we bind will have been bound, and whatever we open will have been opened. God, what a responsibility. And I thank you for each and every person here and what they can contribute. God, stir your spirit in our hearts in such a way that we are moved to follow you and to touch others and change lives for you. God, help us to be the church you predicted, to be the hope of the world. And may we give you all our love and all our dedication. And we pray in Jesus' name, amen.